don't be afraid, know that it's not going to happen right away. You're going to have to pay the price. The early bird gets the worm, but the second mouse gets the cheese. There's people that just jump in and they don't think about things, and they're going to get swept. And the second mouse is going to be the smarter one that maybe took a little bit of time to look at that first mouse get whacked and say, he did that wrong. I'm gonna come in, I'm gonna get that piece of cheese now.
Welcome everyone to the Road Less Traveled Show. This is a show about people who were successful in a previous career and left that career to go down a different path. I'm your co-host, Richard Coyne.
And I'm your co-host, Bill Zahller.
On today's show, we have Brad Morris. Brad, we're so glad you're with us. Thanks for being on.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today.
Absolutely, Brad. Well, thank you for being on the Road Less Traveled show. Well, to start with, can you tell us a little bit about your first career and how long you're going down that path?
Absolutely, Bill. The story started in 1979. My family had real estate in New York. My mom got a big check from selling a building and came to Miami and called me up. I was actually working in Chicago and said, you got to come to Florida. You wouldn't believe what's going on with the real estate market. So I came down, got comfortable with the market, started going out buying real estate, got into a development deal in 1981, and boom, interest rates shot up to 18%. Nobody was buying pre-construction. So I segued into the art business with my sister Robin, who was a very talented artist that had kind of developed. And I said, wow, let's try something with the art business. So we borrowed $2,500 from my mother to start this publishing company. I tell the story about paying her back $500 a month for 3 years. And we still owed her $8,000, but that's a side note. But we got into the art business kind of serendipitously. And at that point, there really wasn't a big market. We had just hit the right time at the right place. And with Robin's art, she had kind of this new deco style. And we published our first print, and I started going door to door to galleries trying to sell. And I was like, well, when you have like 5 come back, I said, well, just try one. And it was just kind of a challenge to, start representing somebody that hadn't been known. But we found out that down on South Beach on Ocean Drive every January, they did this Art Deco weekend, which was kind of a perfect venue for Robin's work because it was so Art Deco. Mm-hmm. And through that, we kind of sprung into meeting people with art galleries. We had a man come in from New York that said, hey, I just got a contract with Radio City Music Hall. Would you be interested in doing the covers for the playbills, Robin? So we got that contract. We started doing licensing. We did deals with Bloomingdale's and all kinds of sculptures and glass. And we went to the art expos. And I'll tell you a cute little story about 1984. Robin and I were at the Los Angeles Art Expo. And this woman comes into the booth and she just falls in love with Robin's art. She goes, I'll take that. I start writing up my invoice and she's like buying the whole booth out. Well, it was, $3-4 grand. It was a lot of money. And I, see she's writing out this check. And I said, I don't really know who you are. And then I see on the check, it said Jackie Collins. And I'm like, wait a second, you're Joan Collins' sister, right? And she goes, oh no, darling, Joan is my sister. I think I actually have a picture of Robin with Jackie at that art expo. You can put that up for a second. She was an incredibly famous and successful writer. There you go. Yeah, that was the art expo in 1984. That's Robin and Jackie. And it turns out that her husband, Oscar, owned an art gallery in Los Angeles, and we did a big show out there with all the celebrities, and they wound up selling out the show, and then Jackie bought a bunch of paintings for her big mansion out in Beverly Hills. So she became like a real family friend and a real collector. And what's interesting is you go to the next slide. I think there's a one with this is Jackie in her mansion in Beverly Hills with some of Robin's paintings in the background. But it was always fun because we'd be watching Entertainment Tonight and we go, oh my God, there's Jackie, there's Robin's paintings in the background. And I think there was one more that I sent you with the picture of the expedition. Yeah, that's one of Robin's most popular prints called The Expedition. That's Jackie with the 3 daughters. And it was just fun to be in that Hollywood scene. The art business was just so glamorous and so exciting. And we did the business for about 10 years together. And then I opened up a retail art gallery in Boca back in 1991. And then one of the artists that I was representing from Europe sent me some paintings one day. I had a big crate, had to go down to Miami Customs to pick up this big crate of paintings, and it had these billiard paintings in it. And I found out there's a market for billiard art. So all of a sudden, I'm in the billiard business. I have a whole catalog of billiard art. I started going to the billiard shows. I expanded to billiard art antiques. And I'm meeting Willie Moscone and Minnesota Fats. And it was kind of a fun spin-off from the art business. And then, 2001 came, 9/11. And this is where the segue kind of comes in with the transition to the next career, because I used to take my kids to Hebrew school, and I'd be sitting in the car at 6 o'clock waiting for them to come out of Hebrew school, and I was listening to the radio, and there was this show on at 6 o'clock called Talking About Mortgages and Real Estate. And this man would talk about, real estate and mortgages, and people would call up and they'd have questions. And I just enjoyed listening to this guy. He sounded so knowledgeable and he had so much wisdom. I said, I got to get back to real estate because I had left it, 20 years prior, and I really wanted to get back to it. So I called him up and I said, I want to come work with you. It took about a month to get into see him. He finally saw me and he says, okay, you're hired. This is what I want you to do. I want you to find commercial properties, office buildings, apartment houses, and shopping centers. We're going to tie them up and we're going to flip the contracts. I said, that sounds great. So I run down to the 7-Eleven, I get my newspaper, I start circling all the classified ads, and I find this 38-unit apartment building in Coral Springs. I run down, I call Anthony, I said, hey, we got to buy this. He goes, buy it. We put it under contract. 2 weeks later, we flipped the contract for $350,000 profit. I said, this is great. This is really, you've been in this business long enough where there's a lot of upside if you can buy right, and your money's always made on the buy side. But I kept going out. My next deal was a public shopping center we found up in Fort Pierce, put it under contract for $5 million. About a month later, I got a 1031 doctor out of Miami. We flipped it for $5,700,000. I made $700,000 on the flip. This is great. This is really great. I can do this. So I did that for a number of years. And then in 2005, I had gone back and forth. My mom had bought this house up in Asheville, North Carolina. And I was going up over the summers. I'd take my kids to Camden, Georgia. I'd go to visit my mom. And I'd, of course, have to run around and look at all the projects that were coming out of the ground. And all these developers were selling their property to Floridians. And since I was in the real estate business, he said, well, why don't you bring us some clients? So I started this company called Mountain Property Showcase. And I would literally bring 50 developers down to Florida. We would do these big 3-day events. I'd spend, $50,000 on marketing, get 500 people in the room. I would send all these people up to the mountains to get, contracts. I'd get checks from all these developers. And then, when the stuff hit the fan in 2008, I'm like, okay, what do I do now? These pre-construction contracts and developments were all bust now. We got into the liquidation event sale business. I had a client in Knoxville, Tennessee that was doing event selling. He said, let's find some of these projects that you're so familiar with and let's do these liquidation events. So we started doing these one-day sales, blowing out all the lots that people had paid $400,000, pre-construction, in the boom, we're now selling for 10 cents on the dollar in the bust. So you've been around long enough where you've seen some of this up and down, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that is, you can, it's always clear looking back, right? In hindsight, everybody sees it's so obvious, but even in the moment, you start looking at stuff toward the end. I remember I was out in Scottsdale, Phoenix, during the 2008 bust when it broke, super hot market like Florida, and people would be they'd be getting into bidding wars and lottery to buy a lot, like for a Toll Brothers project like that. And you'd see some of them that were under, they're building, 7-figure houses, and they're under these super high power lines. I mean, like, well, no one's going to buy that in a normal market. You're buying it now because there's nothing else available, and there's a frenzy for it. But like I said, when it cools off, that nobody wants to live under that in $1 million house. I mean, like I said, it's obvious in retrospect, but people get so frenzied in the moment. It's interesting. Just psychology on that.
Right. Well, don't you feel like we're in a similar situation right now, Bill, with the market the way it is, with the Fed having printed all these dollars and people chasing deals? Doesn't it feel like 2005 all over again?
There are a lot of similarities. Absolutely. Yeah. That's what Richard and I talk about that all the time, that, the numbers is they're stretching more and more. What's keeping them propped up, I think, is, like you said, the low rates. I mean, it's really low rates right now. That's helping some, but as the cap rates keep compressing, they're not going to go to zero. I mean, there is going to be some natural limit. And then when they start unwinding this, I think there's going to be a little bit of pain for some of these deals that are bought right at the peak and don't cash flow for, unless you're interest only and you're, many, many years into the project and everything has to go perfectly. I think there's some people are being aggressive, I think, currently, that will have to pay the price a little bit later.
Yeah, well, I'm involved in this build to rent industry, which is really interesting. And this came out of the crash essentially after 2008, when all these homes were taken back by the banks in foreclosure. These big institutional buyers came in and bought them up and rehabbed them and put them back into the rental market. And then when that dried up, they said, wow, this is such a great business. How do we get more houses? Let's build them. So they went out to all the builders. They said, hey, you've got this project, you've got 10 houses left on that street. I'll take the last 10, or you're building a new project. I'll take the next 10. That has evolved over the last several years, where they're literally going to these developers and saying, hey, build us an entire project. We want 200 houses. The shift to build to rent is like the perfect storm right now. And it's a lot of this financial stuff that's going on with the Fed and the money printing. The average person can't even afford a house right now. This is part of the problem. Here in Palm Beach County, Bill, last year, the average median single family home went from 375 to 500,000 in 1 year. That's a 35% jump. So imagine all the people that got pushed out of that market that can't afford to buy, that are now forced to rent. So these huge institutions, this big hedge fund money, all the institutional capital. And remember, COVID hit last year. All that money that was going into hospitality, retail, office, suddenly needed to find a new home. So right now there's about $60 billion chasing this build to rent space. And that's what I've been involved in. I'm in real estate 42 years technically here in Florida, with 20 years in the art business. But this is my best year in 42, just finding land for these build to rent guys to build these communities. So that's where the shift is. And it just seems like more and more people are going to be forced to rent, because they're not going to be able to because they can't afford to buy. And your business, the multifamily is a perfect example. You're buying multifamily properties, right? You're fixing them up, you're renting them up, and the rents are jumping incredibly. You just, in Asheville, you just had the highest rent jump in a year. You guys went up 21.5% last year in rents. I mean,
it's crazy.
Tell me about your platform, your market. That's just off the chart right now.
Yeah. I just read something about a city in Texas where the rents have gone up 11% across the board in 9 months. And, that's not uncommon. And, you talk about affordability. There still is, unfortunately, inflation is rearing its ugly head, and, it's not going to stop with the money printing that's been going on. So where's the breaking point? Homes are becoming unaffordable. In the past couple of years, and now apartment rents are driving up. We love it, of course, because of that's our business. But at the same point in time, there does seem like something's got to cool it down a little bit. But I don't know that we're going to see that for a little while.
Well, I think we're going to have a Fed meeting today, and I think they're going to announce a little bit of this taper. We're going to kind of scale back on the money that we're putting into the market. But the genie's already out of the bottle. Right. We've already seen trillions of dollars printed. This last year since COVID, I think they printed like 40% of the money in circulation that we've had for the last 250 years. So all this money is just sloshing around trying to find a home right now. And then you have the demographics. If you look at the millennials who are coming into their, marriage years, there's 1 million millennials giving birth a year right now. These kids are looking to get out of their rental apartments. They want to go, buy a house, but they can't afford to buy a house. They've got to go rent a house. And in your situation, you've got these captive tenants that really can't afford to move anywhere because there's no place to go. So I agree with you. I think there will be a cooling off. It's going to have to be gradual. But I think for the foreseeable future, we're going to see an increased inflation. And that's why these big institutions, there's 16 million single family homes for rent in this country, and only 2% are owned by the big institutions. There's a couple of publicly traded companies, America Home for Rent and Invitation Homes. But the institutions only own about 300,000 homes. Last year, we built 80,000 in the build to rent space. Next year, they're talking about 100,000. So what's happening is they have all this capital. They're going to keep buying up everything they can on the single family side. And they're going to try to keep building these communities because they want the hard asset. They want the cash flow. And there's no place else to put the money. So from a business perspective, you see it every day, right?
Yeah. We always talk about that, like you said, with the liquidity, the 40% of new money in the last 18 months that's ever been there to put into circulation. Again, it's, the supply and demand, right? A lot of supply chasing limited assets. So it drives the price up. And we've been saying for a long time, people are going to want to find, and you see that, from even like Bill Gates buying, all the farmland. Just people are trying to find hard assets, either businesses or something like that, versus things that are going to inflated away. And unfortunately, just from a society point, that even, separates more the have and have nots, right? Because the people that can't get into a hard asset, they don't own a home, they rents go up, they don't have anything that's being indexed for inflation as prices rise. And it just widens that gap. So it's even a harder tax on them, the inflation side of it.
Yeah, Bill, I couldn't agree more. I see it every day. I have three millennials myself. My oldest is actually in Alaska as a teacher. My middle is here in Jupiter, but my youngest just got married in Pittsburgh. She's one of the fortunate ones. They just went out and bought a house in Pittsburgh. They closed about a week ago, and they're going to move after the holidays. But she's probably, 1 in 10 that can actually go out and afford to buy a house. These other 9 kids are going to have to go rent. So guys like you that are in that space that provide affordable housing, whatever affordable means today, you're doing a huge service by just providing housing for people. And I feel like I'm doing the same thing by creating these projects where people can have a roof over their head, however affordable it is, because they're never going to be able to buy. And it is going to create a society of more of the bifurcation, like you said, the haves and have-nots. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, Brad, you would know this probably better than I, but I believe I heard a statistic not too long ago that said something about, new home building, not necessarily build to rent, but the new home builders are cranking out, was it like 900,000 homes a year? And the demand is really more like 3 million a year. Is that somewhere in that range?
I don't know the actual demand number, Rich, but I can tell you that we're way under what we need. And this is also part of the problem. We can't build fast enough to create the supply that we need. And You got to remember, we're going through a huge inflationary spiral on cost right now. The builders are feeling it every step of the way, from supply, from lumber, from anything that goes into the house, to labor. And this is creating a bottleneck. You talk about supply chain issues. A lot of these builders can't even get product to build these houses. So you may say, hey, I got 300 houses I want to build, but I only have enough material to build 100 of them. So that's another part of the challenge. So we're never going to catch up with the supply, which means that the demand is going to keep increasing. Guys like you that have these apartments that are rentable, that are viable, that are livable, you're going to have just people coming out the door trying to rent them because they're not going to be able to find homes. You guys are really in a good place,
And Richard and I always talk about that too. One of our kind of dual mandates, whatnot, but we want to obviously preserve and have a return on capital for our investors. But we also want to make it a better place for the residents that live there too, so they can have a nice place to call home. As far so we want to improve that. We've had lots of good feedback as we've turned different projects that people have decided to stay because they can see have pride in where they live now, and it's good.
And it's interesting that the transition from the multifamily to the build to rent. A lot of the bigger players in the multifamily space are shifting to the build to rent because they see their clients, their tenants moving out that want that next step. They can't afford to buy. They're going to rent a townhouse or a single family house, so they're shifting. They're trying to build communities that they can take. Hey, you're moving out of 202, but I've got a nice townhouse here in this new project. It'd be perfect, where it's only another $300 a month. You and your husband, and I know you're pregnant. You want to have the baby and the dog in the backyard. COVID really shifted our whole mindset as to how people wanted to live. The remote work was just an amazing, transition for a lot of people. I was working on projects in the North Georgia mountains that 5 years ago were not viable. Now with people being able to work remotely, they can live 2 hours from Atlanta. And these outlying projects are now, even Asheville is a perfect example of people wanting to live in the mountains. They can work. They don't need to be right in the city. They can commute if they need to get into a town a couple of hours on an airplane, whatever. But it's changed the whole way we operate. And these office buildings that are sitting 30, 40, 50% empty, they're going to have to rethink that whole model now. What are we going to do with these, retail centers that are sitting with 40, 50% empty stores? You're seeing even in Asheville, the Asheville Mall down on Tunnel Road is going to be, redeveloped into, more of a lifestyle with apartments, and, people don't go to Sears anymore. Sears doesn't even exist anymore. This is the challenge and also the opportunity of our times. You have to kind of go with the flow and say, well, times are changing, but how can I kind of jump on that transition? What can I do to, take advantage of the situation, because it is changing so rapidly.
Right.
Yeah. You have to pivot to stay relevant. Exactly.
Right. I mean, because there's gonna be some businesses that you have to go into right there. To the barber shop, you can't get that on Amazon, right? So there'll be a certain bit of it's going to be right. It's a different size, or it's a different scale. So you got to find the right size and scale that, like you said, the massive buildings that are sitting there that in retail or whatnot. It is a challenge. That's where the opportunity lies, right? When you figure that out first.
And again, the mixed use concept of live, work, play, you've got your office with your retail and your apartments. It's all going to be in one spot. You don't have to commute. You don't have to get in the car, burn the gas, sit in traffic for an hour. It's all about lifestyle right now.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
technology is changing. When you go to these shows and you see all the technologies that they have now for, you're incorporating, I'm sure you can tell me stories about your technology, right, in your apartments.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, and that's huge. I mean, we see that around here too, that whole live, work, play kind of concept. I mean, and with the city center down there in Palm Beach was one of the early one, maybe 15 years ago that came out, was a great development. I mean, it was really kind of ahead of its time, but it was a very bold concept, what they were doing at the time.
Mhm.
Yeah, look at Biltmore Park, right? You've got the apartments, the retail, the office, the YMCA's right there. You don't really have to leave the park if you don't want to. You got restaurants,
Right.
you're right there.
And it's all connected to the other part with the housing, and then they have the apartments. So yeah, it's all walkable, and yeah, it's very,
Right.
very nice. Yeah.
Yeah, very successful concept. So I'm sure as you go down your multifamily path, you're going to think, well, what can we do to make this bigger, better, incorporate more of this lifestyle, amenities, or maybe bring in a little bit of. I have clients that are building these multifamily projects with a little hotel component, or some retail components, or they have a little office where people can have like a workspace. They can sit and have like a little mini office, a little conference center. So it's all coming together now. You have to really think, what is today? What do people want?
Absolutely. And Richard looked at some newer builds around here a while back, and they had, a good portion of 8,500 square foot or so of retail beneath it, but they're going to put in a yoga studio, a coffee shop, there's a dry cleaner. I mean, all things that you'd love to have right in your building, right? You can get a workout, you can grab coffee. I mean, it's all really convenient, like you're saying. And that, I think people they'll pay up for the lifestyle convenience factor.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Bill.
Maybe we can, you can tell us a little bit about, as you started, you were in the art world, and then you came back to real estate, and in recent years, you've been, driving toward the build to rent space. Were there some obstacles you encountered along the way as you were really kind of moving into that world, build to rent?
I got in early. I got in about 3 years ago. I've been very fortunate, Rich, in my life, where I've met people at certain times that have kind of guided me. And this is one of the things that I think we all need to look for, somebody that can mentor us and kind of take us down the path. I always knew that there was something to this because I saw what was happening with the for sale side. I said, there is a business here. And I spent about a year with some guys actually out of Phoenix that taught me the business. And every day we'd be on the phone for an hour, 2 hours, just talking through deals and how do we do this. And I was fortunate because I had the contacts with all these developers, so I could bring those deals to the table. And even though it was a little bit early, I started to get the momentum, and I said, oh, this is really interesting. So the challenge was coming in a little bit early, but then when COVID hit last year, Rich, it was just off to the races.
Yeah.
And every deal that I put on the board was going under contract. I just closed my 14th transaction this year, and I've actually got one more closing tomorrow. And I've got 13 more in contract, and LOIs up to kazoo, and I can't keep deals, in my folder because everything's going into contract. But I think this is going to run for a while. They're talking about a 5-year run minimum on this build to rent thing. But you talk about challenges. It's always, where's the business going? How do I incorporate my lifestyle into this? And am I able to wait for the rewards? It was a real, stretch for the first couple of years. I wasn't really making any money. I was just kind of, going hand to mouth, and I knew there was something there, but I was persistent and patient, and now the payoff has really come. So I'm very blessed to say thank you, God. I have a real successful career.
That's great. Well, on this, and you have the success you're realizing now. What was if you're thinking back, what was one of your first victories as you got back into real estate and decided, well, I made the right choice here?
Going back to that flipping contracts when I got back with Anthony in 2002, and I just ran out and I started tying up contracts. I'm like, this is an amazing business. If you can make 300, 400, 500 grand on flipping a contract, and I'll be honest with you, that exact model is reviving itself right now. I'm working with clients right now that are tying up dirt. They're flipping out. I've got guys that are making $3, $4, $5 million on a piece of dirt by just tying up the contract and flipping it. So that victory of seeing this is where the money is. You want to go build something that's great, but how long is it going to take you to build a house, right? And what is the risk in that 6, 12, 18-month process? But right now, the value and the opportunity is really in the dirt. It really seems like that's where the money is. And if you find the right dirt, those victories were in the flipping. That was really the easiest money that I ever saw in the real estate business. And it's still true today.
Oh, great. Yeah.
We may have to have some offline conversation, talk a little more about that, Brad. But
I love offline conversations, Rich.
there you go. Perfect. So Brad, and back into the your folk, shifting away from art and heavily toward real estate. Over the past number of years, is there a funny story you can share? Something that was something along the way that was entertaining?
I would have to say, Rich, the funniest story was how I connected with you guys and how I came to this blog today, because about 3 years ago, I was searching for commercial property, actually for my built for rent platform. And I saw this listing in Asheville, and I noticed that the broker's name was Larry Schatz, who happened to be an old friend of mine from college. And I called up, and it turned out to be my friend Larry, who actually was on your podcast a couple of months ago. And that's how we connected. I said, hey, if you guys can make Larry look good, you got to do something for me, right? So that's how we connected. And I think that's a little bit of a coincidence, but I also don't believe in coincidence, Rich. I think life is really, we have a path, we have a mission. You're talking about what you want to give back and why we're here. It's really to make the world a better place. So I think, we do make decisions in our daily life, but I think there is a bigger, path that we have to follow. And I think if you figure it out early, you don't have to struggle and figure out, what am I going to do today? Why am I here? You need to know why you're here.
Yeah. It's a very small world. I mean, there's so many coincidences that have come across the board, and again, I do remember the first time we met, and then came back to me a little while later. I guess, we probably had an initial conversation, and then I guess, as we reconnected when you heard Larry, I'm like, oh, that's right. Yeah. What you're doing in your world, and some things you're doing is fantastic, fascinating. And, I'm amazed at how big the opportunities are in that space. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be here for a while. And like I said, it's like the perfect storm, Rich. Everything is kind of, coinciding with, the demographics, the finances, the affordability issues, where people want to live, the shift to the Sun Belt. I focus on the Southeast. I do Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas. And again, the 1,000 people a day that are moving to Florida, we can't even accommodate now. Where are you going to put these people, right? And during COVID, we were up to like 1,500 people a day just trying to get to Florida. Not to mention the weather, the, no income tax and all the great, benefits. But this is a perfect storm right now. So I'm going to ride this wave. I've been through the good, the bad, the ugly. I've seen, as you have, Rich, many, many waves, and, nothing lasts forever. So let's take advantage of it and make the most of it. But at the end of the day, we want to leave more than we started with. You want to leave something behind.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, where are you today on your journey there, Brad? I mean, you said you've got the contracts you had, the 14 this year, and then you got several in the queue going. As you're growing the business, kind of where are you on that timeline, and where do you see yourself, your ultimate goal, where you're trying to achieve?
I think I'm going to be like you, Bill, in a way. I think I really want to create something that has income, and I'm getting involved with some developers now where I can actually put money into deals myself. And I think at the end of the day, I'd like to develop something and have an income property. I'm actually working something in Asheville right now that I think would be perfect for that model. So it's great to make money. It's great to put it in the bank. But, real estate's been my love, my life. My family, had real estate. My mom was my guiding light. She was always the driving force. She got me to Florida. She got me to Asheville. My grandparents were the, typical Russian immigrants who came with nothing and started the store and bought the building and the building and the building. So you have to kind of go with what's in your heart and what's in your soul. And, I just think real estate at the end of the day is one of the best places to be, especially now with the way the money is being debased, and you need a hard asset with income. And I just think you guys are in the perfect place at the perfect time as well.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the hard asset in the face of inflation is where you need to be. Okay, certainly Apple stock has done great over the past number of years, but again, Tim Cook's not going to take our phone calls, when we have a question, whereas, you'll take a call from your investors, we'll take a call from our investors. And, and again, the physical assets is the thing. So, Brad, we talked a little bit about, the concept of giving back, and again, providing housing for people and new opportunities and a nice place to live, things like that. Is there anything else that you can share that you do that, with the concept of trying to give back?
Being in the art business, Rich, I was always able to take art and donate it to different charities or doing fundraisers. And I think I sent you a picture of my Men at Work collection. You might want to put that up on the screen if you can. Yeah. This is something that I actually commission from my sister Robin. We were supposed to do a deal with a big developer. They wanted this for their new offices. It was a series of paintings called Men at Work. And it's the whole process of starting with the banker, that has the money to, there you go. Yeah, you have to get with your attorney and sign all the papers to get your contracts done, and then you got to go to the bank and get your money, and then you got to go to the architect and get your plans together, and then you got to clear the land and make that transition for the physical part of it, and then you got your big Metro Joe guy, your construction guy, and then ultimately you have your grand opening. But this was a series of paintings that I wound up keeping for myself, and at some point, my sister Robin is incredibly famous, and she has a collection in a museum now up in Connecticut. She did a series called the Great Minds. It was a series of 50 paintings that her patron actually commissioned and donated. So I think at some point I would like to donate this particular series to a museum or some sort of place where people could appreciate it, view it. And I'm always trying to give back in any ways that I can. We belong to a temple. We're very active in temple. My daughter's actually the cantorial soloist of our temple in Jupiter. And every few months we're doing fundraisers for this group, for that group. People need food, people need clothes. It's just, there are so many people suffering right now, and anything we can do to give back on a personal, community level, Rich, I think is really critical. So we try to give as much as we can. And honestly, the more you give, the more you get. We've been so blessed in our life for, having given, and I know you guys have a 501c, so I'm sure, we can be able to do something together with you guys as well.
Really great.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Brad, what is something? Is there anything you've recently implemented in your business to help you grow and scale that out as you're getting more and more transactional volume and everything to help you stay on top of that?
Bill, that is such an excellent question, and I'll tell you one thing that I've really incorporated recently is LinkedIn, and you can just go in and you can just put a search in, build to rent, and see who pops up. And I have connected with the most amazing people through LinkedIn, Bill. It's just incredible how people respond. You send them a little, two sentence message. Hey, I see you're doing this. I'm doing something similar. Can we connect? And I've had the most, multi-million-dollar deals come out of that little social media that cost me nothing. I'm not a member. I don't, pay anything to join it. But I think the social media aspect right now is so powerful. We didn't have this when I was growing up. We didn't even have computers growing up, no less cell phones. But the technology today, everything at your fingertips. I think the social media, your ability to do a podcast and get this out to the world and let people listen to it. I've listened to probably 20 of your podcasts so far, and I've learned something from everybody. I think it's a way to learn and expose and connect. And you guys have made, great clients and, great investors from your podcast. So I credit you for being in the social media world as well. So that to me is one of the big things right now.
And that's something we're constantly, trying to, figure out the best way to grow that. But I think it's an amazing, I would say untapped, but we haven't fully realized the total value you can get from it. But we're definitely trying to promote that and spread the word, have conversations. And at the end of the day, we always talk about this too. We're not in the real estate business. We're in the relationship business, right? It's all about relationships. How you find the deal, with your relationship with investors, with the tenants. It's all relationship driven. If everybody does right by you, you're going to have a lot of repeat people for a long time.
Exactly. And that's the key in this business, especially if you keep your nose clean, you do the right thing, people come back. And I have repeat clients. I have clients that I have half a dozen deals with. They just keep coming back because it's all done right and they're happy and I'm happy and everybody goes home happy. And that's the goal. You really have to provide a service.
Right. And enable everybody to win too. It's got to be a balancing act with respect to, we all want to do well together. But if somebody starts trying to really tilt it in an unfair, level, it's going to not work. It's going to bite you.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more, Richard. The key that I've been successful with is using partners. All of my deals have partners, and a lot of brokers don't want to share their fees. They're like, I want this fee for myself, but I would rather do 20 deals and get half than try to do 3 and get everything. And I have branched out, and I am so happy when we have a closing and everybody gets a check, and then we all go out to dinner, we have our steak and we smoke our cigars and everybody's at the table. I don't want to be at the table myself eating my steak by myself. I want to be there with my friends and my brokers that can share the wealth. That to me is important.
Absolutely. Yep.
Brad, as you think about all the many things you've done over your career and multiple careers, is there some advice you could share with somebody who's considering making a path change?
I would say, don't be afraid. Know that it's not going to happen right away. You're going to have to pay the price, and everything has a time frame. But I would say, focus and have a goal. I love the analogy, Rich, of the Wizard of Oz. Dorothy knew she had to get to the Emerald City, and she had to follow that yellow brick road. And along the road, she met the Tin Man and the Scarecrow and the Lion. And all these people needed to get to the Emerald City also. They all had their own needs, but together they were able to get there. They fought off the bad witch, and they fought off the monkeys. And, we're all going to encounter obstacles along the way, but if we have people with us that can help us and we'll get there together, I think that's the key. We really need to be a team. I always say teamwork makes the dream work. I love that phrase, and I just think it's so appropriate. I also love the early bird gets the worm, but the second mouse gets the cheese. And I think it may sound comical in a way, but there is a benefit to getting up early, starting your day, having that energy in the morning. I'm a morning person. I'm dead at night. I can't do anything after 9 o'clock. But 5 a.m, I'm on my computer. I'm looking at deals. And that second mouse that got the cheese, there's people that just jump in and they don't think about things, and they're gonna get swept. And the second mouse is going to be the smarter one that maybe took a little bit of time to look at that first mouse get whacked and say, he did that wrong. I'm gonna come in. I'm gonna get that piece of cheese now because he made a mistake. So I think you have to be really careful and not just jump, but don't be afraid. There really is incredible opportunity now. The world is just so full of opportunity. You have to have a very positive, outlook. I think that's the key. Be positive.
Yeah. And the more opportunities you're exposed to, that just continues to feed and cycle upon itself. Before we were doing this, I never would have heard about some of the investment opportunities that I'm in now, because you broaden your exposure to different things and different avenues, and not all of them are going to work, but certainly keep your eyes open, and that'll happen. Yeah. So
and you do learn more from the defeats than you do from the successes. The challenges is what pushes you forward. Right. When I first started out, I was doing cold calling. I would get no. But I knew that eventually somebody was going to say yes. So I would thank that person that said no, because I knew I was getting closer to the yes. I never took no as a negative. I always took it as a positive.
Right. Yeah, that's great. Well, Brett, what's one of the best way for the listeners to be able to reach you and find out more about what you're doing?
My email, you have the brett8955@gmail is my email, and you can push my phone number down if anybody wants to reach me. I'm always available. I'm so thrilled that we connected and reconnected, and I'm going to try to do everything I can to help you guys. So I really appreciate the time and the opportunity to be with you today.
Absolutely. We'll put your email and your phone number down on the in the show notes. And like I said, we can put your LinkedIn profile there too. If it's a good way to, if you're active on LinkedIn, be a great way to reach out.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
Also.
Bill. Thank you so much. You guys are terrific.
Well, Brad, we really appreciate the conversation today, and wish you continued success. And thank you for being on the Road Less Traveled show.
Thank you so much, Bill. Thank you.
Brad, thank you for being on.
Richard, thank you. Thank
Absolutely.
you so much.
Yeah, we really appreciate you being on. We'd also like to thank our listeners for tuning in, and please continue to give us a 5-star rating so we can bring you more great content like Brad Morse today. Brad, thanks again for being on. We'd also like to thank the show sponsors. Park Capital Partners sponsors the show. We also have the Park Capital Value Add Fund. It is a 506C fund. And then we also, one of the ways Bill and I give back is through our Park Capital Partners Foundation, which, as Brad mentioned, is a 501c3 nonprofit. Please certainly reach out, connect with us, and stay tuned. And again, folks, we really appreciate you joining in. And remember, folks, the road less traveled may be calling you. We recommend that you listen and take action. Thanks for joining.